Next is possibly going to be a heated debate about the future of money. To moderate and introduce our guest, she became interested in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology in 2017 and quickly realized that blockchain technology would not only revolutionize and improve the quality of life, but that it would also provide financial reformation for people globally. She has been in crypto full-time since the summer of 2018 and focuses on providing transparent marketing and media solutions for blockchain companies around the world. Please welcome our friend and moderator for this one, Wendy O. Take it away, Wendy, and good luck with this one.
Hi, everyone. As you know, I am Wendy O, and I am very, very excited to be moderating this debate for Jimmy Song and Frances Coppola. This is BlockDown 4.0, and I just want to say before we get started, thank you so much to BlockDown 4.0 for keeping this event free so everybody can listen in and become educated. So, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, y'all ready to get started here? All right, so I have a question. The first question to ask here, which is more moral, Bitcoin or fiat currency? If Frances or Jimmy want to go ahead and answer this first, who would like to go first? Frances, would you like to answer this?
Well, this is an interesting question, isn't it? Bitcoin is technology. It's neutral. It can be used for good or evil. I have a bit of a problem with assigning the term morality to things that are tech. We can use our technologies as we choose to use them as humans. The only thing I would say is that whenever we build anything as humans, we build into those things, our own foibles, our own weaknesses, our own strengths. And so it's not just that our technology can be used for good or evil. It can be itself good or evil, have both good and evil features. And that is true both of fiat currency, which was in its time a technology. You might say it's an outdated technology, but it has been a technology in the past. The fiat money we have now is a technology dating from the 1980s. And it'll be true of the technologies we use in the future. They kind of represent us in a funny sort of way. They are us, they are our children. So to say that one or the other is more moral is like saying one group of people is more moral than another. That might be true, but that really has a lot to do with their values and so forth. So I'm kind of slightly sidestepping the question by saying I don't really think morality should be in this debate at all. I think we should be discussing what Bitcoin is, what it represents, what its future might be, and what the future of fiat currency might be. Are we looking at its eventual replacement? Are we looking at Bitcoin existing side by side with fiat currency? I think that's what we should be discussing, not things like morality.
Jimmy, would you like to go ahead and answer this?
Yeah, I find it very interesting that Frances admits that technology can have good and evil embedded in it, but she doesn't want to talk about the morality of the technology itself. That seems kind of besides the point. Like if it's moral or immoral, you should definitely be talking about it. The reason why we talk about tech giants like Google, Facebook, and Twitter all doing deplatforming or censoring or doing all sorts of evil things with the data that they have is because those issues are very moral. And the fact that they are central controllers of the networks that they control is a moral issue. And this is the reason why we're talking about like how do we get out from under their hegemony and so on. The dollar and other fiat currencies are very similar. They have very bad incentives, and you definitely should be talking about the moral impetus for why Bitcoin came into existence. I think that's extremely relevant for why Bitcoin exists. Fiat currency is highly immoral. It allows for all sorts of theft, especially from the people that are closer to the money printer. The banks that are in control of the monetary system. Every time you get a mortgage, for example, that money is not coming from somebody's savings. It is printed on your behalf. And therefore, you are really diluting the dollar, the value of the fiat currency that everyone else holds. And who are the people that are holding, for example, the dollar? It is not just the people in the United States. It is other central banks, other citizens of other countries. People, some of the most poor people in the world are using the dollar as their store of value. And those are the people whose savings are being diluted. So therefore, it is my contention that fiat currency is extremely immoral because you are stealing from the most vulnerable people in the entire world. People in North Korea, people in Nigeria, people in Venezuela that use the dollar as their method of savings. Because of the way the incentive systems in fiat currency are, you essentially have, people funding leveraged buyouts by Wall Street banks and so on the backs of the very people, that they're supposedly helping, right? The people in third world countries, in regimes that are monetarily oppressive, those are the people that are being stolen from. And I think it is extremely relevant. The reason why Bitcoin exists is to get out from under this hegemonic system that we see in the world today, and that's called fiat currency. And I think it is extremely immoral. I think Bitcoin is way more moral, and I think it is completely within the bounds to discuss that.
Okay, since you want to discuss morality, let's discuss morality. Just briefly, because I actually think my point of view needs to be taken seriously. I do not see Bitcoin as any more moral than fiat currency. You're using a lot of loaded terms to me. You're talking about theft, and things like that, but you've actually not said what it is or how money is being stolen from people. If we actually look at the behavior of the dollar since 2007, the value of the dollar internationally is now higher than it was in 2007. So actually anybody who's been keeping their wealth in the form of the US dollar has actually seen their savings increase, not decrease. I know at the moment, in the last year, we've seen some falls in the value of the dollar, but that was preceded by 4 years of the dollar rising. So you're not talking about theft. You're basically making some loaded judgments and a simplistic economic argument that if you create more money, that necessarily means that everybody else is losing out, without taking any account at all of the price adjustments that mean actually people often benefit from the increase in money supply, which is actually what we've seen in the last 10 years.
I would like to respond to that because in a sense, it's hilarious that you call yourself an economist and don't get that if you increase the supply, you're diluting the people that have it.
Jimmy,
so, you're essentially,
Jimmy,
wait.
Jimmy,
Let me finish.
no. If you're,
let me finish.
Excuse me.
Wait, you got a turn to talk. I didn't interrupt you. You're interrupting me.
I didn't call you names.
Well, I mean, hey,
I
just said you call yourself an economist. So, I mean, like,
I do call myself an economist because that's what I am and what I'm citing.
Well, I mean, I would like to finish instead of. Well, I think you're kind of like going outside the bounds of this propriety and this debate.
Let's get back to talking about the morals regarding Bitcoin and fiat currency.
Well, so she's saying, okay, you didn't explain how it's being stolen. I told you it's being diluted, and she says, well, the people are making more money now, therefore it's fine. No, the dollar doesn't buy what it used to in 1971. The M2 money supply has gone up from 284 billion in 1959 to something like 19.5, 20 trillion right now. I mean, like, it's insane amounts of dilution, and a lot of that, inflation is essentially being exported to these third world countries where they experience hyperinflation. To say that like there's no theft going on is kind of idiotic, honestly. And her saying that, hey, you know what, like, when the money goes up, it doesn't mean that people are not losing out. Of course you're losing out. Anytime that there's an increase in the supply, you have a less percentage of the entire thing. Now, there are other sort of factors that kind of make human flourishing happen. So, you get technological advancements in all sorts of industries, and they make things cheaper. But the fact of the matter is that the money printer is capturing a lot of that value instead of it going to the people that are actually making these innovations. And that's essentially what all of these governments are doing. I don't understand this argument. Well, you haven't shown how people are being stolen from. Yes, I have. You're diluting their money. If you have a dollar from 1971, that you could have purchased a lot more things than you have with a dollar in 2021.
There were a
You
lot
can't
less
make
things
them
to buy in
equivalent. Can you not
1971,
interrupt,
Jimmy.
please? Can you not interrupt, please? I didn't interrupt you. I like this. This
Let's
is three
keep it.
times now in this
Let's keep it
particular one.
to the question.
Yeah. Well, so essentially, what I am saying is that fiat money is highly immoral. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is way more moral because it doesn't dilute you, right? Like you know that there's only ever going to be 21 million, and it is therefore a much better savings vehicle. And in fact, a lot of people are using it exactly for that. And it means that they're not getting stolen from. And a monetary system that allows for theft, especially by a few central controllers, is much, much worse than one that doesn't. That's my moral argument.
Okay, can I come back, please? Because there are a few things that I want to pick up. The first is I'm actually going to talk about the economics here, because I do keep hearing this simplistic argument that an increase in the quantity of money necessarily means the value of money is diluted. That is not true. It is not an economic argument. We actually talk about the quantity of theory as expressed by economists, including those from the Austrian school. It's much more complicated than just a straight line increase in money supply means money is worth less. It doesn't mean that. An increase in money, for example, can spur investment, it can spur increased output. When that happens, you can actually find that your increase in money leads to more production and more output and more prosperity, and people are not being stolen from. There are things like the speed at which money moves around. That can vary as well. There is not this simplistic more money equals dilution. And that's not what we see in the behavior either of inflation or of the exchange rate. And you're going to cite people in other countries using the dollar as a store of value, then the exchange rate matters. What I'm citing to you is the real effective exchange rate, the trade weighted index. And what we have seen is that has increased since 2007. I might add that if we're going to talk about quantities of money, the Fed actually destroyed money between 2017 and 2018. The quantity of money actually fell. So, you know, you can come out with these are kind of arguments. I just want to go back to the data in the economics and say, Jimmy, this just isn't true.
Any final thoughts about this, Jimmy? And then Frances, I'll get your final thoughts and we'll move on to the next topic.
Well, so I think Frances is clearly a Keynesian economist and throws around terms like quantity theory of money, the velocity of money, spurring investment and all that. This has been the lie of Keynesianism since the 1930s. And this is ridiculous. If you believe what she's telling you that if you expand the money supply, somehow your dollars are worth more. Okay, think about that. Mathematically, she's saying the number of dollars increases, somehow your dollars are worth more. The only reason your dollars might be worth more is because of technological improvements made by entrepreneurs in the economy, not because of central bank economists like her. Okay, it's not because she decided, hey, you know what? There's going to be more dollars, therefore this is going to bring prosperity. That's not how it works. And I completely disagree with this notion that we have to bow down at the feet of Keynesian economists and her statistics and her points of view because they haven't worked. And in fact, according to Keynesian economics, stagflation that happened in the 70s shouldn't have happened at all. This should be impossible. Yet it did. And the reason why Keynesian economists tend to be in government and get the support of government for doing whatever work is because they tell them exactly what they need to hear or that they want to hear, which is that if you can print money, run up deficits and whatever, and we'll spin it as it being good for the economy. It hasn't been, it doesn't, and the money essentially ends up going to middlemen and people that are not actually producing value. Instead, goes to governments and people that are extremely inefficient with the money, causes all sorts of malinvestment and horrible crashes like we're seeing now. And ultimately, she wants to sort of frame this argument from her perspective of Keynesian economics. I completely reject that, and I think most Bitcoiners would as well.
Closing thoughts, Frances.
Well, my immediate reaction is that there's nothing Keynesian about the quantity theory of money. It long predates Keynes. It goes back to Irving Fisher and Henry Hazlitt, and it was cited by Ludwig von Mises. You need to update yourself on your own Austrian economics, Jimmy, because that's what I'm talking here. I'm talking about simple quantity theory of money as channeled by Austrian and monetarist economists, not Keynesians. So I don't think it's very helpful to bandy these loaded terms around and demonize particular schools of economists. I'm just talking about the economics, how money works. That's all.
All right.
I really think that's not right, because basically you've bandied around all the Keynesian terms and
it's not a Keynesian
sort of
term.
presenting economics as if Keynesian economics is the only economics. That's it.
It's
And
not
like,
Keynesian.
if you're not in my frame, then you don't understand economics. That's
It's
essentially
not
your argument.
Keynesian, Jimmy.
All right,
let's Keynesian. It's completely
I'm
speed
not
of money,
citing
velocity of money,
Keynesian.
quantity of money. Yeah, thank you.
not
I think you've
Keynesian.
said enough.
let's go ahead and
Keynesian.
let's go ahead. Thank you for both of your contributions to this particular topic. Let's go ahead and move to the next one. Are you guys ready?
Okay.
Go for it.
Is a monetary system based on debt better than one on an asset like Bitcoin? Who would like to go first?
I think I'll go first. So debt, I think, is horrible for most people. In fact, the only people that it's good for are the people that are in power. And essentially, in this case, you get governments that are deficit spending at every level, at the government level, at the company level, at the retail level. Everyone is living on debt. And any parent can tell you that. If you give your child something right away and then make them pay it off later, that's worse for them than saving up and then buying the toy or whatever it is that they want at the end of it. That builds character, right? That's actually sowing and reaping. That's actually going and saving up for something and then buying what you can get with that money that you've saved. A debt-based economy essentially brings consumption forward, and that's what we've been seeing for the last 80 years. A lot of people that are getting whatever they want right away and then being enslaved to their debt for a very long period of time. And this goes back to sort of the morality of the fiat system. I think it is horrible for the moral character of anybody that's under fiat currency, because you can get whatever you want right away and you just get into debt and pay it off later, right? And that's been the case at the retail level, at the company level, at the government level. This has the corrupting effect of just pushing things down the road, not really building up civilization. You see all sorts of overconsumption in all sorts of areas. You see, a lot of people being overweight as a result of overconsuming. A lot of people that are being materialistic as a result of overconsuming, getting whatever they want now instead of learning to save and then doing something, buying whatever it is that they are going for later. Instead of building up character, it's tearing down character. And I think it is highly immoral. I think a debt-based system is worse. Whereas with savings, you do learn this stuff. And we've seen this in the Bitcoin community. A lot of people are foregoing buying something that they otherwise would have under a fiat system. Instead, they're saving, planning for the future, building something interesting that might have helped civilization and so on. They're creating value through making something that they really want to make instead of just buying whatever they kind of want to buy right now. Instead of contributing to civilization, they become more consumers in a debt-based society. In a savings-based society, a lot more people are focused on building. So I think it's better.
Frances, what is your take on a monetary system based on debt? Is a monetary system based on debt better than one that is based on an asset like Bitcoin?
Again, I'm not at all sure that this is that I see these as either or. I mean, my preference actually would be for a monetary system that is based upon equity. In other words, that we share in our collective futures, and that is the money we use as a medium of exchange, and it's what we store the fruits of our labor in. That would be my preference, and that's what I want to see. Bitcoin doesn't do that, and neither does the present fiat system. That I think the fiat system does need to be changed, does need to be transformed. I don't think Bitcoin is the answer to what we need to do to our fiat systems. In the end, we're all part of society, and our collective futures come from what we produce as a society ourselves, what we produce and how we work together to produce it. And we all need to be part of that. And I don't think that Bitcoin encourages people to be part of anything. But I agree that the debt-based system, the system that essentially says young people have got to get into debt because to support the savings of the old, which is what we currently have actually, is a good way of organizing things. Debt tends to feed on itself, tends to ratchet itself up and eventually become unsustainable, and then we have a crash. And I would like us to move to a system where we don't have these periodic debt crises. So that would be my preference.
Well, we found something that we can both agree, that all three of us can agree on. So, Jimmy, any final thoughts about this? And then I'll give Frances an opportunity to give final thoughts, and we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what an equity-based money even means. I really I genuinely don't know what you mean by that. But I will say though that we do have a share in trying to build up a civilization, and the best way that we found is to empower entrepreneurs. And like the way that fiat system tends to be is that you're taking savings away from people, so they're much more incentivized to spend. And they don't save and create businesses and goods and services that other people might want, that they might not even know that they want. Instead, it encourages consumption because of velocity of money and all that stuff that you like so much. So as a result of that, you don't get the building. Whereas Bitcoin, you do get that building because you are saving and you are you do have the opportunity to create goods and services instead of having it diluted away from you every time the Fed or any other central bank expands its money supply. So I would say that Bitcoin definitely does exactly what Frances wants, which is building up civilization, because it empowers entrepreneurs. It doesn't incentivize consumption right away, which the current system does. And instead, it allows you to save, and it does actually create a community. Unlike what Frances said, I think she mentioned it doesn't get you involved in anything. Actually, I think it does. It gets you involved in civilization, in trying to figure out where you can use your talents and all your skills and experiences to best find a niche in society where you can provide the most value or goods, and that ultimately builds civilization. That ultimately makes it better. Whereas fiat most certainly does not.
Final thoughts on this particular topic, Frances?
A couple of things. First is that the only way in which people can, as you say, save in Bitcoin as it stands is based upon continual price rises. That ultimately is not sustainable, and it's not a way in which we can build a society together. We actually need something that is stable, and we actually need something that we're all part of. And that's why I don't think Bitcoin is the answer. There were some fairly odd things that you said, like a comment about the velocity of money. The velocity of money just is. But also, if you actually look at at our economies as they are now, with very, very low interest rates, with huge amounts of savings, because people are having to save for very long retirements because of our extended lives, and that's happening the world over. To say that the whole fiat system incentivizes consumption right now, no, it doesn't. That's why we have such rock bottom interest rates. It's because people aren't spending; they're saving instead. We've got more savings than than we can deploy in entrepreneurialism. That's why interest rates are on the floor. It's a bit of an odd thing to say. I know there are people who get themselves into debt when they shouldn't, but there's a whole load more people who don't get themselves into debt at all, who have savings, and you don't talk about them. But for every one person's debt, there's another person's asset. It totals to zero. So if we've got excess debt, we've also got excess assets. That's the way it works. I'm not saying it should work that way, but it is a bit weird to say, oh, everything's based upon consumption. If you're going to have a thriving economy based upon production, you need to have consumption. Otherwise, nobody's buying your production. economies are circular. So I think sometimes focusing too much upon incentivizing savings actually creates a depressed economy.
All right.
Can I respond to that, Wendy? Because she just said a bunch of things.
Yes, you can respond to this to Frances, and then I'm going to give Frances an opportunity to respond back and close before we get on to the next topic to keep things fair.
All right. Although she started last time and she finished last time, just so you know. I don't know if you were keeping track. But anyway, Frances just said that interest rates are low because there's so much saving. I don't know. I know she knows this, so I don't know why she's saying it this way. The central banks are setting the interest rates, not people. It's not savers that are willing to lend out. It's central banks and other banks that are creating their own money that are setting the interest rates. This is a ridiculous statement that like it's savers that determine the interest rates. If you look at the natural rate of interest, if for example you try to get a loan like from somebody that doesn't get to print their own money, so a payday lender is a good one. They charge way more interest. And oftentimes the credit rating, at least if you measure it in the rates of like give back and stuff like that, are very comparable to what you would get in a normal loan. But the interest rates have to be high because they're actually lending out of savings. What the banks do, what commercial banks do, retail banks do, and of course the Fed and many others, they lend out of money that comes into existence for the loan's benefit. It's not coming out of somebody's savings. And this is something that I know Frances knows, so I'm not sure why she's saying it that way, but the interest rates are set by them. So every time the Fed lowers interest rates, it lowers a whole bunch of other rates because now like they can lend out and still make margin and all this other stuff. So if you lend out at 3% and you can get loans at 2%, you make that margin at plus fractional reserve lending and all that. So you actually make many multiples of that. But that's how it works. This is why interest rates are low, not because there's so much savings out there. By the way, like all of this talk about like, oh, people have savings in their retirement accounts. They're not in the dollar. They're all putting it into like stocks or real estate or something else, right? They put it into other vehicles because the dollar is such a poor store of value, and they don't want to put it into just leave it in cash because that cash is trash. It's going to melt like crazy. And this is where we come back to the whole velocity of money. What the entire fiat system is meant to increase that velocity of money, right? Like you take on debt as a way to make the economic sluices flow and so on. These are like Keynesian fallacies about if you have economic activity, then those things are going to be very good for everybody. And it's somehow going to cause wealth to appear out of nowhere. Doesn't matter if it's good activity or bad activity. Ultimately, like there isn't savings in the dollar. There's savings in all sorts of other vehicles for the reason that the money that the dollar is so bad. And as a result, we have an asset inflation almost everywhere in the economy. You can see this in stocks, in real estate, even like a lot of different collectibles, especially over the past year, have like gone up by 8x. If you're paying attention at all to the sports card economy, or even like collectible Barbie dolls or anything, all of them have like 8x. It's because people don't have a good store of value. It's because the dollar and other fiat currencies are such poor stores of value, something that Frances says people are saving, they're not, that they are willing to go and bid up all of these other things that are actually scarce because the dollar, the pound, the euro, all of these things are not.
Final thoughts, Frances, and I'll let Jimmy give his final thoughts so we keep everything fair.
Okay, I'm not going to touch on this velocity of money thing again because that's just so wrong. It's not worth even discussing. I think the existence of very large amounts of savings, particularly from the East, is well documented, and the effect of that on interest rates is well documented. Jimmy himself mentioned people from other countries saving in the dollar. They do, lots of them. And one of the effects of that is to create large amounts of savings, and that one of the effects of that has been to depress interest rates. So pity I can't share my screen actually, or I could put up a chart that shows you how interest rates have fallen since in the last 40 years. It's not just in the last 10 years, and it's not entirely due to central banks. Central banks tend to follow what happens in the economy and in markets. So one of the things we tend to observe, and again, I can show you this if you want, is that central banks actually have tended to keep interest rates slightly higher than the interest rates on risk-free assets in the market. So we've seen the yields on, until very recently, the yields on USTs, for example, were actually below the Fed funds rate. And those are market set rates. So, and then the yields on other things follow suit. So, and the other thing I would say is that the reason for asset price rises is largely due to QE, which has created a large amount of money going to institutional investors. Not into the wider economy, who've then used that to buy other assets, and that has the effect of pushing up prices. So, and including Bitcoin. Bitcoin's price rise over the last 10 years has at least partly been due to QE. That would be my final thoughts.
Final thoughts, Jimmy, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see with Frances that this is the central banker line. It's not our fault. It's not because of us that all this money gets printed. It's not because of us that the rates keep dropping. Don't believe them for a second, because the rates do drop. She just admitted over the last 40 years, or let's see, the fiat money has essentially existed all over the world since Nixon cut ties to gold in 1971. That's about 50 years of history. During all of that time, interest rates have constantly been going down. Every time the interest rate drops, there's more lending. That lending money comes out of nothing. So it's money created ex nihilo. So as a result, you've seen the M2 money supply grow from 284 billion in 1959 to something like 20 trillion today in US dollar terms. Now, I'm sure this is true of the pound, the euro, the yen, everything else. But the interest rates keep dropping because they keep printing more money, and they have to keep printing more money. Otherwise, the entire thing collapses. If you stop printing money, then the interest rates go up, and then all of this quote unquote investment that it goes away, right? Like a lot of these bonds collapse. A lot of these lenders are not made whole. There's nobody that buys commercial bonds at like 3% when they can get 7% somewhere else. So you need leverage. You need all of these vehicles that central banks make in order for the economy to essentially keep going, to keep the Ponzi scheme going, in other words. There's a reason why the average fiat currency only lasts 26 years. It's because they keep playing this game where they print money for something that they want, the people in power want, and then they just keep going with it until at some point there comes a point where it's unsustainable. We're very close to coming to that point, and I believe that it will. Fiat currencies all over the world will start collapsing. You've seen that already happen with Venezuela and Zimbabwe. Of course, that was before this whole lockdown stuff. But I suspect that we'll see a lot more of it in the next couple of years. You'll see currencies collapse. You're kind of seeing that in Lebanon, Turkey, Nigeria. All of their currencies are kind of in the very early stages of hyperinflation. So Frances likes to say, oh, there's this other risk-free rate of return that the central bank is imitating or whatever. There is no risk-free rate of return, first of all, and second, it's the central banks that indicate to them what's going to happen, and then they lower it and so on. And her conception of how money works is what the central bankers want you to believe. But if you actually pay attention to what's been going on and how the monetary supply has expanded and so on, it's very obvious that what they have done is essentially expand the money supply for the benefit of those in power, and that's it.
All right, so this actually kind of segues into our next topic and our final topic, because I believe we have about 15 minutes left, as we're going to extend this panel for another 5 minutes. over the course of time, there has been a lot of different currencies in exchange for values. Will fiat currencies outlive Bitcoin? Who would like to answer this first?
I'll take it on if you want.
Please.
Okay. I don't like giving predictions. There's clearly a strong community supporting Bitcoin. So as a niche currency, I think it is probably likely to last for quite some time. Fiat currencies, I'd like to talk a little bit more about what they are, because what we're talking about here is national currencies, with the exception of the euro, which is a pan-national currency, but it is nevertheless the currency of 19 countries. And national currencies, whether they are called fiat currencies or whether they are backed by an asset, it makes no difference. They are symbols of national identity. They represent kind of who we are. You can see that, for example, in the Scottish referendum in 2014, when the Scots were desperately trying to make a case for keeping the pound, even though they wanted to be independent. They wanted to keep the British currency. It's who we are, it's what we are. And I think that's true of the Bitcoin community as well. The Bitcoin has become who we are. And so for that reason, I think Bitcoin will last, but I also think that national currencies will last. Some of those national currencies may fail. Jimmy's mentioned Venezuela and Zimbabwe and so forth already. We always have a little bit of a fallout among national currencies when the governments of those countries get themselves into very, very big trouble and the whole thing collapses. Those are rare events, but they do happen from time to time. But the majority of national currencies, that doesn't happen to. What they do sometimes go on and off gold standards, on and off asset-backed scenarios, depending on what's going on. We're currently in a probably the longest recorded example of fiat as opposed to asset-backed money. And yes, it might collapse, I don't know. But I don't think that national currencies are going to disappear. I think what might happen is that one or more of the world's governments will decide to reattach their currencies to gold or something like that. So that's how I would frame it, is let's talk about national currencies and say those last. They last for hundreds of years. They last even for thousands of years in some cases. And let's talk about Bitcoin as having a community of believers around it that are going to make sure it lasts, and see it in that context of things that last, but that change their nature during the time of their existence. That's how I see it.
Jimmy, would you like to go ahead and respond?
Well, so I want to point out something that Frances just said. She said there's no real, like, it's more about national currency, whether it's asset backed or not, like, whatever, right? Like she's sort of lumping both of them together. There's a world of difference between purely fiat currency and an asset backed currency. An asset backed currency is a lot more stable and it's a lot better for civilization. And can you not interrupt, please? All right. So an asset-backed currency is way better, and in fact, like there were quote-unquote national currencies that were backed by gold for a long time, from like 1870 to 1910. They were all backed by gold, but nobody really cared that you were using a particular currency. It was more for the convenience of the people in the country. But international trade and so on was much easier because you just did the math. Okay, this peso represents this many ounces of gold. You can convert that to the dollar very easily doing it that way. With the current system, what you have with quote unquote fiat national currencies is that you get all sorts of friction every time you cross any border. And in fact, the way the current system works is that vast majority of currencies don't have a trading pair against the other one. What they do have is a trading pair against the US dollar. So every time, say somebody from Kenya trades with somebody in South Africa, what they don't do is trade their currencies for each other. What they do is they go to the dollar, and then settle in the dollar, and then they get back their own currency whenever they need it, and so on. And this is true for every business, international business around the world. So her sort of like dichotomy between national currencies and non-national currencies, I guess she hasn't really defined them. She's just sort of saying, well, national currencies will exist, and at some point some of them will be asset backed. If they're asset backed, that asset is really the money. It's not the national currency anymore, is my contention. And her dichotomy doesn't really make sense. What you get is something like Bitcoin, which is sound money. Gold would be certainly a lot sounder than fiat money. The soundness of the money matters. And her contention seems to be that it doesn't, that, the national currencies will exist. Wendy's question was really about fiat money versus Bitcoin. She sort of expanded fiat to, national currencies that are also backed by assets. Sort of subtle trick there that she did. But those are very, very different things. I do believe that, there may be national currencies that might be backed by Bitcoin, right? That would be an asset-backed national currency, if you will. There are other countries that might do it with gold or something, or who knows, maybe silver. I have no idea. But those would be very different things than fiat currencies. The specific question that Wendy asked, I don't believe that the fiat currency regime that we're all under is destined to last all that long. I do like making predictions, and I'm going to guess in the next 20 years, a few of the really major ones will collapse, and we'll all be looking back on it as if they were completely inevitable. But from this vantage point, it doesn't seem that way at all. And it'll be because of economists that kept telling the governments whatever they wanted to hear, saying, "Oh yeah, you can print more money because it increases the velocity of money, and it'll spur more investment, even if it's malinvestment, and that'll spur the economy," and so on. This is essentially what economists of Frances's ilk essentially end up doing. So I believe that Bitcoin will definitely last longer than fiat currencies. I believe that national currencies that are backed by assets such as gold or Bitcoin will probably happen. But I don't think Frances's answer really sheds any light on the original question, because national currencies backed by an asset means that they're convertible. And if they're convertible, then it's really the same as that asset.
All right, we have about 4 minutes left. So I'd like to give each of you about 2 minutes left to give your final thoughts about this particular topic. Will fiat currencies outlive Bitcoin? Frances, if you want to go ahead, and then after she's done speaking, I will try not to cut anyone off after the 2-minute mark, but I want to make sure everybody gets their time in. So Frances, if you'd like to take this, and I'll give it to Jimmy to close.
I'm not really going to accept Jimmy's definition of fiat currencies as being somehow fundamentally different from asset-backed currencies. I mean, we've seen over the recorded history, there are a variety of currencies backed by all manner of things. I quite like grain-backed currencies myself, or goat-backed currencies. They're quite good too. And always they're backed by essentially the production of the economy. That's always what backs a currency. And it doesn't matter whether you call it a fiat currency or an asset-backed currency. You mentioned the classical gold standard, 1870 to 1914. During that time, the asset that backed everything was the British gold sovereign. And it was set, the value of it, the denomination and the value of it, and even the weight of gold in it was set by the British government. The classical gold standard is this idea, this sort of golden age when everything was when gold was used as the medium of exchange. Actually, it wasn't really like that. And it is clearly nonsense to talk about gold itself being the medium of exchange when a currency like the dollar is pegged to it. During Bretton Woods, or during the various times that the US dollar has been on the gold standard, or the British pound for that matter, which goes back further, nobody says that because it's pegged to gold, each pound or dollar, whatever it is, worth a certain amount of gold, that therefore what you're exchanging is gold. That's not true. You're exchanging dollars. Nobody talks like that. They're exchanging dollars.
All right, Jimmy, you have about 2 minutes left to give your final thoughts.
I find it hilarious that Frances refuses to acknowledge that an asset-backed currency is very different than currency backed by nothing. She somehow seems to think that, pure fiat currency is somehow backed by the economy. Yeah. So why don't you try to go and exchange your, $100 bill for some goods in the for something from the central bank, right? Whatever it's backed by, it's not really going to. They're not going to give you that. And if they printed $100 trillion tomorrow, that $100 bill would buy you nothing, and it's not backed by anything. This is the key difference between sort of her point of view and mine, which is that she seems to think that the government will make good on the fiat currency, or that it's really no different than having it backed by gold or having strict convertibility. I will note that during 1870 to 1910, there were no exchange markets because the exchange rates didn't change, because they were all backed by gold. Currently, you have all sorts of currencies that are constantly fluctuating against each other, in large part because they're all fiat currency. They're not backed by anything. If it was actually backed by something, or if each of these were backed by something, then they would stay stable. Instead, what you get are assets that are not backed by anything, and therefore it's basically whatever the government says it is. It's a naked power grab. It's highly immoral. It's a cesspool of theft, cronyism, and a lot of other things. And this is why Bitcoin will win, and this is why Bitcoin is much better.
Thank you both so much for coming on and having a debate and talking about this. I was very intrigued by both sides, and I like to surround myself with intelligent people so I learn as well. Thank you so much to BlockDown for allowing me to moderate and host this panel. Frances, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Jimmy, I appreciate your time, and I thank you very much. And I hope we all can get together one day and have some delicious ice water together.